Hi, and welcome to TECAM 5195. Today we're going to be covering editing for conciseness. Before we get into the actual strategies for editing for conciseness, what I want to try to do is explicitly contextualize some of this for those of you that are in the Teaching Technical Writing certificate program. And so for many of you, you'll be teaching technical communication service courses to non-majors. And so as you're teaching conciseness, I just want to point out a few things. The first is really trying to explicitly change the mindset of your students. For many of your students that are coming out of high school or have a more traditional English background, they're used to writing papers with a word count or a word limit. And so with that particular word count comes writing that often is wordy, that often is intentionally wordy. And so part of it is changing your students' mindset and teaching them explicitly that there are reasons to be concise, and it actually serves your reader to be concise in lots of ways. It makes your message clearer. And so that's one thing that I'd like you to sort of take away into your classroom. Second, wordiness is a function of empty/filler words. So being able to differentiate making things short just for the sake of making things short is not the goal of editing for conciseness or writing concisely. The goal is to remove words that don't have any impact on the particular communication or the particular sentence. And then thirdly, another thing that you can bring into your classroom is to teach the caveat that shorter is not always better. I tend to see this, and this is probably not true across the board, but I tend to see this in STEM students that have a STEM background. When teaching them conciseness, they really are pretty good at writing concisely, but oftentimes can remove so much of a sentence that it changes the meaning of the sentence itself. So those are three things that you can, as you're teaching your students to write and you're teaching your students to write concisely, you can explicitly bring into the classroom. Getting into actually editing for conciseness, there's four main patterns that lead to wordiness. And so we'll talk about those four patterns, and these are from Revising Professional Writing. So the overuse of the main verb to be. The best way to find the main verb in any sentence is to look to the right. It's the rightmost verb. And so there's sentences can have multiple verbs, but those multiple verbs are considered auxiliary verbs to the main verb. And so here's a sentence: the university could have been more understanding. Could have are examples of auxiliary verbs, and been is the main verb. And so it's the rightmost verb in this particular sentence. So that's how you identify the main verb to be. I'm going to look at two examples. The first is a wordy example. The final presentation is a summary of the course. So we see that main verb to be. So as you're editing, as you're teaching your students to edit, look for that main verb to be. And then look what comes after it. So our strategy here is to convert our noun summary into a main verb. So whatever comes after the main verb to be is a potential verb. And so a revised version of this is the final presentation summarizes the course. So we go from is a summary of a course to summarizes the course. Here's another example. The data could be of great interest to the scientists. Could be of great interest. So we've got a couple auxiliary verbs, but we've also got our main verb to be. So we can convert that prepositional phrase into a main verb. So again, looking at what comes after the verb to be. So we could say the data could interest the scientists. And so our main verb is now interest instead of be of great interest. One quick teaching tip as you're teaching conciseness to students is it's really important, and we talked about this previously, to emphasize meaning to students as they revise their own writing. So when students start to edit for conciseness, they start to remove so much of the words that it changes the meaning. So you could actually make this sentence shorter. We could say the data interests the scientist. We could remove that auxiliary verb could, but the problem with that is it actually changes the meaning. The meaning of the sentence is the possibility of its interest to the scientist, and it's not the fact that it does interest the scientist. So it's a nuanced difference, but the meaning does change if we remove that auxiliary verb. Our second pattern is the expletive structure. How we can find the expletive structure is we should look for the word there or it followed by the verb to be. So some examples: it is necessary for us to find a solution to this problem. So we've got that it is necessary structure. That it is the expletive structure. Our strategy here is to find a stronger subject and verb. So if we can, let's introduce a stronger subject instead of it. That's not a very strong subject. And a stronger verb than is. So our revision here is we, so that's our stronger subject, must find a solution. Must is our stronger verb to this problem. Here's another example. There are several options for purchasing the textbook this semester. There are is our expletive structure, and our strategy is the same. Can we find a stronger subject and introduce that, and then find a stronger verb instead of are and introduce that? So our revision here looks like this. You can, so you is our stronger subject, can purchase the textbook in several ways. So purchase is our stronger verb. So we go from there are several options to you can purchase. Thirdly, we've got nominals. Nominals are nouns that are derived from verbs. And so these are typically nouns that end in ence, ance, ion, or ment. Not always, but often. And here's an example. His memo contains a recommendation that we lease the copier. So we've got this nominal recommendation. It ends in tion. And we can convert that nominal to its original verb form. So his memo recommends that we lease the copier. Finally, hedges. How do we identify hedges? Hedges are words really that occur in three different ways. They're either verbs or adjectives that refer to belief or hope in the future, so things like believe, think, hope. Secondly, they're verbs that refer to intentions, for example, aim, intend, or plan. Or modals or adverbs referring to possibility or potential, might, could, would, possibly. Okay, so these are ways to hedge the definiteness of a particular statement. So if we take a look at some examples, we've got a hedged sentence. The results could indicate that we should reallocate resources, versus and our hedge here is could and should, and unhedged, we should reallocate resources based on the results. So two things I want to point out to this with this example. In academic writing, authors often tend to hedge purposefully, right? And so if you're conducting academic research, you can't be certain because there are certain caveats that we have to work within when we're reporting our results of academic research. So if you're editing academic research, it may be good to leave the hedges in or ask your authors to actually introduce hedges. In professional writing, we typically don't need to hedge quite as much because we're looking for an actionable decision, right? Our writing is going to be create some kind of action or some kind of response. So the unhedged version is probably more appropriate in a professional document than in an academic document. A quick teaching tip: we can bring in discussions of audience when we teach hedging, right? So this idea of academic versus professional, it all depends on audience. So again, it's one way to sort of teach your students. There's no prescriptive, one-size-fits-all way to edit or revise your own writing in regards to hedging. You got to really consider your audience. And then we can also bring in discussions of ethics when we teach hedging, right? So if we're removing a hedge and we're saying for certain, you will save money if you do this, versus you might save money if you do this, there's an ethical implication to that if you're communicating that. And so it's a way to to teach students about ethics and about audience as you're teaching them hedging. So that's our 4 patterns for wordiness and how to revise for wordiness. Let's take a look at a few practice exercises. Go ahead and click anywhere on the screen to complete these practice exercises, and then we'll be done with this video.